lifestyle diseases are because of an imbalance between what our cells are designed, the environment that we're designed to thrive in, and the environment that we have been put in. There's a mismatch. And I think Ayurveda addresses that beautifully, because Ayurveda, in my mind, and maybe this is oversimplification, is like tending a garden. So it works beautifully for prevention, for tending that garden, for taking care of the soil, making sure there's enough sunlight, making sure that you don't have any weeds in the garden. You're taking care of the plants that you want to grow and providing them with the right environment that is in balance with what they need. So I think Ayurveda is the true lifestyle medicine, right? It's personalized, it's individualized now.
For proteins, I have a very simple calculation, and that fact nobody has challenged, that an adult needs about 1 gram per kilogram body weight of protein per day. So a 60 kilogram adult needs 60 grams of protein. And the staple in the traditional Indian diet is a mixture of cereals and pulses. So suppose the person takes 400 grams of cereals in a day, that will provide about 40 grams of protein. And if he takes another 100 grams of pulses or a dal, that will provide another 20 grams, and that will give 60 grams of protein. So the quantity is taken care of. And so far as the quality is concerned, although individually the cereal and pulse proteins are of poor quality, together they make a good quality protein. They're complementary in nature. So why do we need any other additional exotic sources of protein? Are there any other likely harmful effects of consuming uh, protein much more than is necessary on a long-term basis?
Yeah, for excessive protein, there are many. One is the renal effect, right? So the kidneys have to handle this extra protein, break it down, and it is well known that excess protein consumption can hasten chronic kidney disease. And in fact, people with chronic kidney disease are recommended to have a slight lower protein intake, especially animal proteins. Another one that's getting actually a lot of attention now is the gut microbiome effect. And higher protein diets are actually associated with a deleterious effect on the gut microbiome. Everybody, and this is not just any protein, not just necessarily animal protein, but excess protein of any form is associated with unfavorable changes in the gut microbiome. This was recently published. Several papers came out on this. So it's a well-established fact.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Yes Talks. Today's session is on unlocking peak potential, the real LLM, revolutionizing longevity with cutting-edge lifestyle medicine. Our guest speaker is Dr. Pankaj Vij. Let me start by giving a brief introduction to him. Dr. Pankaj Vij is the clinical lead for lifestyle medicine, medical director of lifestyle medicine at Kaiser Permanente. He's passionate about preventing and reversing metabolic diseases by treating their root causes. He's the chief architect of Crack the Wellness Code, a global community platform for health promotion that has followers worldwide. A graduate of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, India, Dr. Vij is also the author of the book Turbo Metabolism, 8 Weeks to a New You. Today's session will be in the conversation format, moderated by Dr. Ramesh Bijlani sir, who is a prolific writer and inspirational speaker, and once a professor at AIIMS New Delhi. He is a spiritual seeker now at Shri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. Welcome, Dr. Pankaj sir. We are so glad to have you with us on the Yes platform today. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, and it's such an honor to be on this platform with one of my favorite professors. So it's a humbling and an honorable day for me. Thank you.
Dr. Bijlani sir, I request you to take over the session.
Welcome, Pankaj, to this platform and finding the time. I'm sure it's very early morning where you're speaking from. Probably 7:30 in the morning. You have jumped into one of the unconventional areas in modern medicine, sometimes the area which is thought to be reserved for the lunatic fringe in the medical fraternity. And The fact that we call it lifestyle medicine is itself a concession to the prevailing atmosphere. I'm just reminded of what Dean Ornish says in Reversal of Heart Disease, that when he initially wanted the clinicians to refer patients to him for his studies, and he told them what he will do. So the clinicians told him that, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to refer our patients to some sort of a Swami? So then he thought, let me make it, give it a term which is, call it by some way, which will be more acceptable to those who have learned scientific medicine. So then he started saying that, well, I want you to refer these patients to me for a lifestyle modification course. So thank you for joining. And as Arunima said, you have a book on this subject, Turbo Metabolism, and I'm sure there are many more in the offing to come. So this term turbo metabolism itself is not a very common term. Probably you have coined it yourself. So you may start with explaining this term.
Thank you. Yeah, again, great honor to be in your presence and to be having this conversation with you. And I'm sure I will learn more than the knowledge that I share. So this is absolutely a great platform, and I've been listening to a lot of and watching a lot of your videos and learning from them already since we met in August. So thank you for hosting this and having me as a guest. Yeah, I was really intrigued by the term metabolism, and honestly, I didn't fully understand it for many years, uh, and and nor do the lay people that talk about it. But almost every other patient that I would see would come and say, "Oh, there's something wrong with my metabolism. You know, I'm having this problem. I can't lose weight. I have diabetes. I have uh, pre-diabetes. I have sleep apnea because there's something wrong with my metabolism, and I don't know how to fix it. I need a medicine for my metabolism." So that really got me thinking, what is metabolism? And it turns out that metabolism is everything, right? In medical school, we learned about diseases being caused by germs and genes, and we can give somebody an antibiotic and kill the germs and take care of them. Or they have some sort of genetic disorder and we can't take care of it and we just have to manage it. But what is this thing that people are talking about called metabolism? Well, it turns out that disease and aging is mostly caused by disorders of metabolism, and it's happening on the cellular level. So every single living being, every organism that is made up of cells, and hence every cell in the body has this energy production and energy consumption mechanism, right? All of that together is metabolism. So it is a process by which energy is provided to the cell or the organism, and the process by which this energy is then used in an efficient manner to do whatever functions that cell or organism needs to get done to have to function optimally, right? So then I added the word turbo, and you see that in the ads for cars, that this car has a twin turbo engine or something like that. That is very powerful, and all the fuel that's being presented to the engine is being used to propel that vehicle forward. So in a lot of ways, our body is a vehicle, right? And you talk about the body being a vehicle for the soul, and we are here for a purpose. And in order to fulfill that purpose, whatever we're here to do, that vehicle needs to work in the most efficient possible manner. And that's what I mean by turbo mode. So I want to live my life in a turbo mode. I hope that, all of us listening do. And in order to do that, every cell in our body needs to be working in turbo mode, which means that we need to be utilizing the energy that we are being presented from the universe, whether it's in the form of food, water, air, the things that we consume and ingest and how we come in contact with the environment, and use it in the most effective possible way so that we can be agents for change, to make the world better, to take care of each other, to have more life in our years and more years in our lives, to have more love, right? To be loved by others, to share whatever we have to share and do more good. But in order for that to be happening, the vehicle needs to work in the most efficient possible way. And that's what I mean by turbo metabolism.
So it's much more than just energy metabolism. You have brought in also the intention behind the production of this energy and what this metabolism is really for. So it's of course to keep us alive, but then you brought in also the purpose of life into it. That's what this metabolism. That's why this
Yeah, and
term.
everybody that you talk to, I mean, when you think about, okay, what do you want? What do you mean by living better, right? What do you mean by longevity? People, can say it in different ways, but in essence, we want to breathe better, we want to live lighter, we want to move with a mission, and we want to proceed forward with a passion and purpose, right? So, again, you have a passion and purpose in your life, which is different now, Dr. Bijlani, than it was when you were a professor teaching all of us. Now, your passion and purpose is the pursuit of something higher. I have a passion and purpose. Everybody listening has a passion and purpose. And in order for us to do that, we need to be living our lives in turbo mode.
That's in fact quite in tune with what the ancient Indian system of medicine, Ayurveda, was all about. And that's why it's called Ayurveda. It's not medicine. And it was because of this, that when Dr. Karan Singh was the health minister, he said that we should not translate AIMS, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, into Akhil Bharatiya Chikitsa Vigyan Sansthan. That's how it was translated to start with. He said it should be called Akhil Bharatiya Ayurvigyan Sansthan.
Wow.
Because, so now the Hindi translation is Akhil Bharatiya Ayurvigyan Sansthan. Because Ayurveda is about emphasis on life, on longevity, and on living a meaningful life. It's not about treatment of disease, as medicine or medical sciences would give an impression. You have voluntarily gone into the depths of Ayurveda as well, which you have also included in your book, Turbo Metabolism. So, would you like to say something about what you have found very valuable, particularly impressive in Ayurveda, and how you look at the decision recently of the government in India to introduce Ayurveda in this syllabus for the MBBS students?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I've gone into the depths of it, but I've certainly been exploring. And as you said it beautifully, this is the science of life, right? And we are finding worldwide that allopathic medicine does not have the answers for the current environment of what's affecting 8 billion human beings, right? Mostly it's non-communicable diseases that will not be cured by IV antibiotics or some quick fix, that like we did in the 100 years ago with penicillin, we could take care of so many people with sanitation, with immunizations, with uh, being able to provide clean water. We could take care of cholera, for example. That's not what we're seeing now, right? So we're seeing something what we call lifestyle diseases. These lifestyle diseases are because of an imbalance between what we are designed as what our cells are designed, the environment that we're designed to thrive in, and the environment that we have been put in. There's a mismatch. And I think Ayurveda addresses that beautifully because Ayurveda, in my mind, and maybe this is oversimplification, is like tending a garden. So it works beautifully for prevention, for tending that garden, for taking care of the soil, making sure there's enough sunlight, making sure that you don't have any weeds in the garden. You're taking care of the plants that you want to grow and providing them with the right environment that is in balance with what they need. Whereas Western medicine, which is only a century or two old, is more like firefighting, right? It's really good for acute illness. We can take care of someone that is bleeding profusely or is in sepsis or is in severe congestive heart failure. They're having a heart attack or a stroke or a pulmonary embolism. Sure, we can fix that problem. But then if we didn't fix the root causes for that, it's likely that they're going to have another heart attack or another stroke, or the cancer is going to come back in a few months or a few years because didn't even address the cause. We didn't even address what environmental conditions brought about that disease in the first place. So I think Ayurveda is the true lifestyle medicine, right? It's personalized, it's individualized. Now there's this sexy new term. We talk about personalized medicine, but Ayurveda is all about personalization. It's not one size fits all. Everybody gets 20 milligrams of atorvastatin or 325 milligrams of aspirin. It's about personalizing. Say, okay, me as in I have a certain mind-body constitution. This particular way of treating me is not going to work as well as this other way. Or even foods, right? These foods don't work for me as well as others. We're talking about now looking at measuring everything. Let's wear continuous glucometer. Let's do ambulatory monitoring of everything, and then come up with a customized solution for each individual. Well, Ayurveda talked about that 3,000 years ago. So I think there's much to learn. I wouldn't say that I'm the expert, but even just scratching the surface, there's so much value that we can help people understand. And one thing that I learned that I was wrong about for so many years was that, oh, Ayurveda is just about taking these herbal remedies and you take these plants and you're cured. Well, that's a very small part of it. That's like saying yoga is only about asanas, right? The real value is so much more, and the herbs or the yoga might be 1/8 or 1/10 of the whole thing. Where I would be careful is that we don't want to mix the two completely, right? And I think that's the scary part that's happening a little bit, where people are practicing out of their uh, expertise. So if someone is an Ayurveda expert, they should not claim to be an allopathic doctor and say, "Hey, I can, do your appendectomy or do something that I'm not fully qualified to do." So that's a little bit of the tricky part. But I think the value in prevention is absolutely tremendous.
I'm glad you gave that message that Ayurveda is not so much about treatment of acute illness, but about promotion of positive health. Uh, because sometimes we find that because of the prestige that modern medicine enjoys, people generally seek treatment in modern medicine. And when they find that it's not working or the patient has reached a terminal stage, then as a last resort, they feel, let us try Ayurveda. In fact, Ayurveda is not for that. Ayurveda is more for prevention of disease and for promotion of positive health.
Absolutely.
Let's turn to another aspect again related to Ayurveda in a way. Currently, there is a lot of talk about intermittent fasting. Now, you can see that in a way, the type of meals that sort of the routine in terms of meals in Ayurvedic Dincharya is not very different from intermittent fasting. So, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I often when I think about these things, I like to go back to evolutionary biology. And if we think about our own evolution, you know, it is conceivable that we would have gone for periods of time without access to food like we do now, right? We have access to multiple choices, sometimes, buffet options in a breakfast, then there's a mid-morning snack, then there's lunch, there's a mid-afternoon snack with, whatever hot beverage you're consuming, then there's dinner, and oftentimes there's a post-dinner snack. So that's eating 5, 6 times a day, and that is, again, not uh, synchronous with what we believe, how we believe we have evolved over 5 to 7 million years, right? We have evolved with food scarcity and have really elegant mechanisms to deal with food scarcity, where the body knows how to switch over into different types of fuel. All right, on the second or third day, we can, even the brain can switch into using ketones for fuel, so that we would still have mental acuity to be able to hunt for food, even when we're not having access to food for several days in a row. So it's conceivable that that's a lot. Our bodies are designed because of just the time in evolution, the time in that environment. They're designed to thrive in that sort of setup a lot better than what we have now. And and again, you said it. It was something that was well described in Ayurveda 3,000 years ago. Now we're learning in bench research that when you provide periods of fasting, you actually activate mechanisms that are good for longevity, such as autophagy, such as bursts of stem cell production, all these things that will help to clean up dead cells or unhealthy cells that could later turn into cancer and provide stem cells to help heal things that need healing. So again, it's another reminder that whatever was written in texts many, many years ago, many thousands of years ago, is turning out to be true. And when we paint it with the lens of modern evidence-based medicine, and it's coming out of a research paper from some prestigious institution, all of a sudden it's considered as valid. But this is something that's not really brand new.
Now, while I mean, we can't go back in time and wish that we have food scarcity, but all the same, the mechanisms that we have in the body for dealing with scarcity should get a chance to
Right.
work. Because if we don't use any capacity in the body, it weakens. If we use it, it gets better. So, going by that general principle, even these mechanisms, which are of value, even today in many situations, the mechanisms which come into play during periods of scarcity should have an opportunity to work. And one way to do that is that at least we have a period of fasting of 12 to 14 hours in the 24-hour routine, and it's not really very difficult. If one has an early dinner, which Ayurveda talked about, and modern medicine also agrees, an early dinner is better than a late dinner. So if you have a dinner around 8 p.m. and breakfast around 8 a.m., at least those 12 hours of fasting are assured.
Right, but a lot of people actually misuse that, and they conveniently skip breakfast because it's easy for them to do that, and then just start eating at 12 or 1, and then the 12-hour window or the 10-hour window actually goes late into the evening. And we know that insulin sensitivity actually declines in the later part of the day. So that's probably not a good way to do it. And second, one of the big robbers of sleep is acid reflux. So if we're eating later into the day, you're still keeping a 10-hour window, but if you're eating between 12 noon and 10 p.m., that's probably not the best way to do it. The better way to do it would be, as you said, eating breakfast at 8 or 9 and then closing the feeding window by 5 or 6 in the evening or sooner. And then you have from 5 or 6 until 9 the next morning is the period of time when you're not eating. That way you're going to sleep better, you don't get acid reflux, you have better insulin, you have an opportunity to use up the fuel better because you still have some waking hours after 5 p.m. And so all of that extra energy is not getting stored as fat because of insulin, and you'll have less visceral adipose tissue and fat accumulation, and that'll be a much healthier way to do intermittent fasting than having that feeding window to open and close late in the latter part of the day, to do it in the earlier part of the day. And really, I mean, simple way of thinking about it is that you have all this stuff on the conveyor belt or the pipeline that has to go through the furnace, right? The furnace being Agni, that's digesting the food and again extracting energy and intelligence out of that food for us to consume. And if that's done in a way that is more effective and efficient, that's going to put us closer to turbo metabolism mode than to do it the same 10 hours, but do it in the second half of the day.
You talked about missing breakfast. That reminds me, I think long ago there were some studies which had shown that children who miss breakfast in general don't do so well in school. Of course, academic performance is influenced by so many things, but this was brought out as one of the factors which could, I mean, having breakfast, it was one of the things which seems to improve performance in the school.
Some of that might have been marketing too. So,
Mm.
if you recall, I mean, a lot of these studies come from America, which is the land of marketers, and there was a lot of stuff that came out about breakfast cereals when cereals came about, and in fact, Kellogg's Corporation, profited from that, and then the manufacturers of orange juice touted orange juice as the best source of vitamin C. And of course, orange juice was touted as one of the breakfast foods. And we know that fructose is horrible and it causes fat storage and basically bypasses the satiety mechanisms. So you, we need to be a little bit careful even when something is quote unquote evidence-based medicine, because we need to look at what is the source and what might be the motivation of the people presenting this information. Is it really to do good or is it to sell something? But in the context that we're discussing, I think we're talking about a healthy breakfast, which would not be cereal and orange juice.
Uh, the food fads promoted by the food manufacturers keep changing every 15-20 years. The latest seems to be the craze for which they have promoted for high protein foods. Uh, for proteins, I have a very simple calculation, and that fact nobody has challenged, that an adult needs about 1 gram per kilogram body weight of protein per day. So a 60 kilogram adult needs 60 grams of protein. And the traditional Indian diet has the staple in the traditional Indian diet is a mixture of cereals and pulses. So suppose the person takes 400 grams of cereals in a day, that will provide about 40 grams of protein. And if he takes another 100 grams of pulses or a dal, that will provide another 20 grams. So 40 from the cereals and 20 grams from the pulses, and that will give 60 grams of protein. So the quantity is taken care of. And so far as the quality is concerned, although individually the cereal and pulse proteins are of poor quality, together they make a good quality protein. They're complementary in nature. So both quantity and quality of the protein are taken care of. So why do we need any other additional exotic sources of protein?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this idea that uh, you, you need to have all the essential amino acids in a meal or in a food and hence you have to eat eggs or have milk, was absolutely debunked. And the concept of complementary amino acids absolutely makes sense. So if you're eating, and you can get the needed amount of protein, calories, fat, carbohydrates from any kind of healthy diet, as long as it's a healthy diet, whether it's a vegetarian diet, even a vegan diet. And certainly, if somebody wants to have some good quality eggs or milk, that's fine, but it's not needed. As far as the quantity, you're also absolutely right. It's an excess food, whether it's protein, carbohydrates, or fat, is going to get stored as fat, right? So, regardless, if unless somebody's running marathons and lifting heavy weights because they're getting ready for Olympics or some kind of professional sports, for most of us that are doing sedentary work, if we're consuming extra calories in the form of protein, it's still 4 calories per gram, right? So if I'm having an extra 50 grams of protein, I'm getting those extra 200 calories that I'm going to store, right? Unless I'm, again, following that up with going and doing, 100 Surya Namaskars or 50 push-ups every time I eat that protein. It's not going to magically turn into muscle and prevent me from getting sarcopenia. I have to do other things to build that muscle. And even then, it might not happen if I don't have the genetics for it. So I think the 1 gram per kilogram for most people still makes sense. It might be a tiny bit more for someone who's an athlete, and it might be a tiny bit less for some people too. But that's a good rule of thumb number to go with. And you're absolutely right. This is one of the newer uh, fads that's going on, because food manufacturers and marketers are constantly thinking about how they can manipulate our mindset to sell us something that they need to sell. Because let's face it, eating more, carrots and cauliflower and broccoli uh, doesn't and onions and tomatoes doesn't really make a lot of money. There's not a lot of profit to be made in these commodities, but when they're processed into something that's more flashy and seductive, what they're doing in their own mind is they're adding value, doing a value add to this commodity. They're making it into something else that people will be willing to pay more money for, and that's where the profit is.
if the enthusiasm for high protein diet and protein supplements, etc., leads to excessive caloric intake more than one needs, apart from putting on fat, are there any other likely harmful effects of consuming uh, protein much more than is necessary on a long-term basis?
There are many, yeah. For excessive protein, there are many, and I think we can spend the entire remaining time on that. But a few that come to mind that most people will uh, recall right away are one is the renal effect, right? So the kidneys have to handle this extra protein, break it down, and it is well known that excess protein consumption can hasten chronic kidney disease. And in fact, people with chronic kidney disease are recommended to have a slight lower protein intake, especially animal protein. So that's one that's pretty easy to grasp. Another one that's getting actually a lot of attention now is the gut microbiome effect. And higher protein diets are actually associated with a deleterious effect on the gut microbiome. Everybody's interested in gut microbiome and understanding that a lot of what's going on in the body, whether it's hormone production, food absorption, prevention of infectious diseases, of course, gut health, mental health is uh, controlled by the gut microbiome. And a higher protein diet, and this is not just any protein, not just necessarily animal protein, but excess protein of any form is associated with unfavorable changes in the gut microbiome. This was recently published. Several papers came out on this. So this is a well-established fact. And the best diets for gut microbiome are ones that are more on the plant-based end of the spectrum, whether there's vegan or vegetarian type diets. Um, and if someone's having animal consumption, animal food should be limited to less than 10 to 15% of calories. So 85% of the calorie intake should be, most of your plate should be plant foods. And and if and we can absolutely get the necessary protein intake from in that way.
So even if someone manages to maintain a healthy body weight on a high protein diet by reducing the carbohydrate and fat content, still that excessive protein will not be really good for the person, isn't it?
Exactly, because again, there's all these other effects. Even if it's
Mhm.
um, equivalent calories, a diet that's getting more of those calories in protein is going to have more harmful effects. And going back to evolutionary biology too, if you think about it, our ancestors would have had a much easier time finding, some root vegetables from the ground, finding potatoes or eating. I mean, the longest lived populations, if you look at the blue zones all over the world, they're one of the staples that most of them have in common that they're eating are, well, they're all predominantly plant foods, but one of the staples is root vegetables like yams, right? Sweet potatoes. If you look at the Okinawans that lived a long time, they were not eating a high protein diet, they were eating a very high carbohydrate diet. And again, it would be lot easier to find a strawberry or an apple hanging from a tree than to be able to hunt and kill even a small animal like a squirrel or a rabbit, because you would have to chase them and they want to run away.
Yeah, that is an opinion which many of those who deal with the history of nutrition say, that although for a long time we believed that the primitive man was a hunter-gatherer, but then it was realized that man is too weak an animal to really live primarily by hunting other animals. So he had some meat as and when it was available, but by and
Right.
large he was a scavenger forager rather than a hunter-gatherer.
Yeah, or just switch. It would be a gatherer hunter, right? So you'd be gathering a lot more than hunting and certainly scavenging. Yeah, we don't have, the sharp canine teeth. We don't have the night vision. We are not nocturnal animals, which is when a lot of the predators come out. Uh, yeah, for all those reasons, we would not make good carnivores.
Now let's turn from diet to physical activity now. Uh, there are so many different types of physical activity, and of course, any physical activity is better than no physical activity at all. But having said that, yogic postures, endurance training, uh, exercises which work against resistance, uh, how would you compare these different forms of exercise and can we combine them in any way for the best results?
Yeah, absolutely combine. And again, going back to evolutionary biology, right? The majority of exercise that our ancestors were getting was, keeping their body upright against gravity and walking long distances, possibly up and down many hills, again in search of food. Uh, so you think about uh, cardio exercise, which we call aerobic now, which would be something like running, walking, riding a bike, uh, swimming, and resistance exercise, which is basically resisting something that's causing the muscles to go in the opposite direction. You're resisting and contracting those muscles. Um, and then building that endurance, and all of that can be done with yogic postures, with something like Surya Namaskar. I think it's a fantastic exercise that incorporates all of my favorites, which are push-ups, pull-ups, squats, and planks, right? If you think about Surya Namaskar, it's a repetition of some variation of those four exercises. And combination is key. In modern times, we call that cross training. When we're cross training, we're less likely to put too much damage on any one particular area. Like, and a lot of my friends not talk about having meniscus tears and or plantar fasciitis, and that's because most of them are runners, and that's all they've been doing. So when we mix up exercises, when we cross train, and I think again yoga has a beautiful uh, prescription for that, you are less likely to get injury, and yet you will get all the benefits, the cardiovascular as well as the endurance and the resistance benefits from doing those exercises. And you don't need a gym, you don't need heavy weights. You can do that, all of that with body weight. It's not expensive, it doesn't take a lot of time. It's just knowing, right? So to me, when I realized this, it was like a big light bulb moment that you don't, yeah, you don't need any special equipment or place. You can in any amount of time you can just squeeze it into the day. And it's so important, especially as we get older and we're all thinking about trying to have more life in our years and more years than our lives, to keep that vehicle in its most optimal functioning condition. We need to prevent sarcopenia. We need to preserve muscle mass. We need to preserve bone mass, not get osteoporosis. And that can all be done. And if exercise was a pill, right? Just imagine how many drug companies would want to get that patent, because out of everything that we talk about, this is exercise is the fountain of youth, is the absolutely most powerful longevity drug that we could have. And I think everybody needs to we have 24 hours in a day, 1 hour should be spent in doing physical activity to keep the body moving optimally if we want to stay in turbo metabolism.
Thank you. Actually, this was a very powerful message delivered very effectively. And after all, what is 1 hour in a whole day if it helps you live a healthier and longer life? Because otherwise, it'll be all compensated if you try to save that 1 hour, because these days we are becoming very conscious of time. Everybody is short of time. If you try to save that 1 hour, it'll be counterproductive. Then one will be spending a lot of that time in hospitals and not have that much of lifespan. And so actually, it's not really a wise choice to not even spare 1 hour for structured physical activity in the day.
And not only that, if you spend that 1 hour, the other 23 hours are a lot more effective. So it's a good investment. The return on that investment is much more than 1 hour, because you're going to get back so much more efficiency and so much more efficacy in the rest of your day. And when we talk about dinacharya, we talk about timing, we were talking about meal timing early. If possible, exercise done earlier in the day has more of a beneficial effect for most people, unless you're really a night owl. For most people, exercising earlier in the day sets up the rest of your day to be a lot more productive and effective in terms of your mental acuity and really mental health as well. Your attitude is a lot more positive. You have much more energy. So spending that time doing some exercise, ideally outside, so we get a little bit of sun as well. Before the sun is fully peaking, like in the early hours of the morning, it's really good to be outside and getting some exercise in the early part of the day. Hence the term Surya Namaskar, right? They were saying Namaskar to the sun when the sun is coming up. I mean, again, how was this all figured out? Is mind-boggling.
And before we throw the session open to the audience, is there some final message that you would like to give? Because one of the things you see which uh, people have reservations about is that people find it very difficult to make any significant changes in their lifestyle. They're accustomed to having living life in a particular way, so they can't summon enough willpower to bring about those major changes in lifestyle. So, do you have anything in relation to that?
That's a great question. And again, it comes up all the time. Like, I just don't have the willpower. I can't do this. And I tell them this has nothing to do with willpower, right? Do you have the motivation? Obviously you do because you're asking me, we're talking about it. Do you have the ability? Absolutely you do. We all have the ability to make some change. Is there a trigger? Something happened, right? That's important. If someone has a trigger, some life event, they had a health issue, or they had their friend had a health issue, or they have some emotional trigger that got them thinking that they need to make a change. Uh, that's important. That helps. But the most critical components are their emotional state and the environment, right? So if you can create a positive emotional state and there's some kind of emotional buy-in, why I think I should do this. And if you ask most people, they'll say, yeah, I think I should because of whatever number of reasons. Then you need to create the default environment to make it happen automatically, which means you if eating more junk food is your problem, you take it out, right? It's not available in your environment. It's just not an option. You're changing the default settings. If getting to exercise is something that you feel like you're having a hard time getting going, you change the environment. You make it such that you don't have an option to do anything otherwise. You have your whatever you need to do that exercise in the morning, whether it's your running shoes, your shorts, change of clothes, towel, whatever you need right there looking at you, and you can't even do anything until that's done. And it'll take a little while to do it artificially that way, but once it becomes habit, it's the inertia is built, and then it just becomes part of your day. So I that's my acronym that I had come up with. It's MATE, MATE, motivation, ability, trigger, and there's two E's. There's environment and emotion. So I tell them it's nothing to do with willpower. And yes, willpower is weak. Willpower is, if you're going to be depending on willpower to make something happen, forget about it, because almost everything is stronger than the willpower, right? You need something else. You need emotions. And willpower is like a mouse, emotions and environment is like an elephant. So let's bet money on the elephant. Change the environment, get the emotional buy-in. You don't need to invest too much in willpower because willpower is going to lose, but emotion and environment is going to win. So let's change the default settings.
I think now we can throw it open to the audience, and let's see there are many questions by Matthew Cherian, but the person I can see on the screen is his wife Amita. So anyway, either way, it's okay. Uh, Matthew Cherian, has been very much in the field of aging. He was the CEO of Help Age India and continues to do a lot of work under other banners for the aging population. And Amita also, of course, is also interested in many of these things and is was my yoga student in the first batch in 2008. So let's see what questions they have. So many questions from them in the chat.
So I'll
Yeah. So
read out the question. What about those with Maybe I think they mentioned this question while you were talking about physical exercise.
3 questions.
Yeah, what about those with osteoarthritis who cannot walk too much or
My
squat?
net was so I just turned off the camera so that it's and Matthew's out for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely, we want to personalize and customize, right? So those with arthritis who can't walk too much or squat might be able to do something that does not involve as much gravity, like water exercises, swimming, right? Or even walking in the water, which will, of course, the buoyancy will take off some of the weight off the joints. That could be an option, or a recumbent bicycle, a stationary bicycle might be an option. Uh, there are many yoga poses that don't involve as much strain on a particular joint, right? It's like, okay, if you have osteoarthritis, where is it? In the knee? Is it in my right knee, or is it in my left hip? And we can modify. We don't want to completely give up resistance exercise or weight bearing exercise, but we can take some of the weight off that joint. So cycling, recumbent bike, swimming, water aerobics, just water walking might be some modifications that we can look at. And I think a good trainer or a good yoga instructor can always provide options and alternatives to uh, based on that person's individual needs. Is it too late to change course in 160s? Absolutely not. I mean, I think until about the 50s, nobody's even thinking about these things, right? So it's only when the sand is, you notice that the hourglass is almost empty when much of the sand is gone, or at least half the sand is gone. That's when we start thinking about it, and it's not too late to change course at all. And again, our Vedas have described people living to 100, and there's a prescription for each quarter century of life. So, which means that at least some of our ancestors were living to 100 and beyond. And I think if we can find that balance with the environment and live in a way that is conducive to longevity, we can achieve 100 or more too. And importantly, not just the lifespan, but the health span, to be able to do the things that you want and enjoy, and to have an impact on the people around you that you would like to have. That's more important than the number of years we live. Is it okay to keep to 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch, and no dinner? Absolutely. Yeah, we talked about this at length. And uh, that would be a much more optimal way to do intermittent fasting, by getting the most of the, you have to meet your caloric needs, right? If you're eating, you're not getting enough energy, that's going to promote sarcopenia and um, promote faster aging too. So as long as you're getting your caloric intake, whatever that is, and basically that's resting metabolic rate plus the effect of activity, whether that's structured or non-structured exercise, and that's about 30%, and then the thermic effect of food, right? So for meeting those caloric needs, 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch, are just fine. We have two people with their hands up. We have our illustrious Dr. Ruchika Goyal and Pankaj. I think Ruchika had her hand up first. Can they just unmute and talk?
Hi, yes. Hi, Pankaj. Thank you, Dr. Bijani, for organizing this. One of the last things that Dr. Bijani mentioned about the fact that we are, victim of our own habits and tend to fall back. Any suggestions for how can we build accountability into the system whenever we have like a work related responsibility, even if let's say we're not able to keep up with the exact timeline, we will, because there's accountability, somehow manage to get it in. But I feel like anything which is related to health, just because there's no accountability, it just gets pushed back to the back burner. So one thing I have done, I just want to mention as an example, is using just some of the technological things available. I use Apple Watch as a sort of like as a little personal guide to set up reminders, but having shared my activity with few close friends and set up some challenges or goals in activity, that has kind of been like, okay, it gets me going. This is my week, I have to do it. So any suggestions about that, some time tested methods?
Yeah, you said it right. I mean, when I teach these classes, I tell the participants to go share your goal with 5 of your closest friends, right? Go tell 5 of your closest friends, hey, I'm signed up for this. I'm going to be making these changes. I'm going to be eating this kind of diet. I'm going to be exercising every day for 45 minutes. I'm going to get to bed by 9:30. I'm going to turn off all my screens by 8:30. I'm not going to be drinking any alcohol. Whatever it is, changing you're making, if you tell 5 of your closest allies, they will be that support system and accountability system. And in our age of uh, sort of social isolation and loneliness, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of technological ways to do that too. One that comes to mind is an app called Strava, which a lot of my friends use. And it's a way to set up challenges and share goals more related to fitness with people that it could be with your friends or it could be people you don't even know, like you're training for a marathon and you want to run, 20 miles every week, and you're setting this up with a group of people that have the same goal. So it's probably not as powerful as sharing with people that you know that you care what they think about. But yeah, we are social animals, right? So figuring out a way to build that tribe and make it happen. And you said, we do it for our work thing. Why? Because there's other people uh, depending on us, or somebody will ask you, hey, you were supposed to, Ruchika, we are supposed to submit this paper and you didn't do your manuscript. Now I can't do my part. Can you please get this done? Right? And then you're going to stay up or work on the weekend and get it done because you're accountable to somebody else. So other people are involved. But if it was just you by yourself, I mean, a classic example of this is book writing, right? They say, how long does it take to write a book? Well, it depends. It could be 30 years or it could be 30 days, depending on what the deadline is and what's at the other end. So we need that accountability to other people, and somebody's watching and asking us, then we're likely to get it done faster.
That's why, they say if a person wants to give up smoking, one of the things that he can do is to tell his friends, I have stopped smoking. Because then, he'll feel very embarrassed if he smokes in front of them.
Right.
That helps his willpower.
Absolutely. Pankaj
Thank
has.
you. Yeah. So another person has raised the hand. Please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and speak up.
Yes, this is Pankaj Huku. Thank you, Professor Bijlani, for setting this up. It was a pleasure meeting you at the Amazonians banquet just a couple of days ago and talking to you briefly. And I'm looking forward to getting your new book too. And Pankaj, long time I haven't talked to you or met you since you left Beaumont. So looks like you're doing a lot of good work, and thank you for doing this. It was a great presentation. The question I had, and it's just as a side, this is all good information, and I think we need to incorporate. But we come across in our practice and otherwise people from time to time who do not follow any of this. They're doing completely opposite in terms of diet and exercise and smoking, what have you, and they end up leading long lives. And we sort of pass it off that, oh, it's in their genes or whatever. But I want to see what your views are, and if you can comment on that how do you explain, or what are your comments about people who do not follow this lifestyle and still have long lives, and not necessarily with chronic illness. They have relatively illness-free life. So could you comment on that?
Well, I think we all kind of know the answer. I mean, in some way, they're outliers. What we're talking about is probably what's applicable to the majority of people. But yeah, I mean, and as a pulmonologist, I'm sure you have heard this many times when you talk about smoking, and you'll get the answer, hey, but my uncle, smoked 10 packs of cigarettes a day and he lived to 110. I mean, there maybe outliers, but if we're talking about what is beneficial to the vast majority of people, I mean, uh, and yeah, for whatever reason, these people may have more cellular resilience that they don't get COPD or lung cancer, even if they're smoking that much, or there's a subset of obese people that are metabolically healthy, right? So in general, obesity and overweight is strongly associated with metabolic syndrome. But there is a subset of obese people that have absolutely perfect numbers. And I mean, one might argue that their distribution of fat is different. They're not accumulating it in the visceral tissue. They're getting it more in their limbs. And but yeah, again, that would be the outliers. And as far as I'm concerned, my focus is on uh, helping the majority of people rather than trying to figure out what's different about this minority and really what works well for me. I don't know if that's a good answer. I'm sure Dr. Bijlani's answer is going to be a lot more eloquent.
No, that's a perfect answer. The two persons who
Yes, thank you.
raised hands, you can see.
Neha Singla ji, please go ahead.
Hi. So- Hi, this is Nikhil. Sorry, ma'am. Okay. One second. One sec. Hi, Dr. Bijani. Hi, Pankaj. Great session. Really inspiring. My question, Pankaj, is that as a diabetes and endocrinology person, like, treating patients with that, I'm seeing a lot of South Asian patients with metabolic disorders. And some of my perspective is that our energy intake is very, very different from our energy expenditure these days. And the refined grains and flour that we uh, process stuff into and eat, and without movement, adequate movement, is causing the diabetes epidemic. So, how do we need to change as a South Asian community in terms of our eating habits so that it's more in alignment with our new energy expenditure, which is mostly sedentary?
Well, hi, Nikhil. Yeah, great question. It's absolutely that, and probably also the thrifty gene hypothesis, right? Where again, going back to evolutionary biology, we have evolved spending a lot more time in food scarcity. Our ancestors have, so we are much more geared towards surviving food scarcities, surviving drought and lack of food. And when we're put in an environment of essentially food excess, we're putting it in the visceral adipose tissue. And the other thing I would add to that is stress, especially uh, in modern times, and those of us who are first generation immigrants. There's an added just exponential stress of trying to kind of balance and live essentially in two cultures. um, and I mean, you've done it yourself. You spoke about it at length, making those changes, shifting more towards a whole food plant-based diet, getting rid of refined grains as much as possible, getting rid of processed foods and oils as much as possible, exercising, uh, being aware of this extra level of layer of stress that we have and managing it accordingly by doing all these things that Dr. Bishlani talks about, learning to meditate, learning something about yoga, even if it's superficial, enough to make a difference in your own life, making those social connections. I mean, these are all the things that we can do to mitigate the deleterious effect of, again, the unhealthy environment that we have been placed in, or actually we've chosen to be placed in, right? We made the choice. So now we have to change. We have to be aware of what those choices come with, the risks, and uh, make different choices every day in our lifestyle.
Thank you. Thank you. That's powerful. And one other question I had was, what about the GMO foods? Like, what is the data on GMO? Like, there's a lot of controversy around it. What is your take on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy, and of course, genetic modification of foods came about when the amount of land available on the planet was not enough to feed 8 billion people, right? As the population kept on exploding, we needed to figure out, food scientists needed to figure out ways how we produce enough rice and wheat to feed the population of the world. So per se, probably there's nothing uh, to say that just because a food is GMO that it becomes uh, by default it becomes harmful to us. It won't qualify as being organic because one of the definitions, one of the things in the definition of organic is that it can be genetically modified. But per se, it's not like de facto that just because it's GMO, it's bad for us. So I think we need to look at it on a case by case basis.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Harish, sir, please go ahead. You want to raise your hand.
I have a small comment and a question. The previous question on people with very different lifestyles may have a long life. I have noticed it in my own family. Maybe, and I have no data to support it except some instances. Maybe mental stress is a factor because what I found in my family, people who lived for very long and did not took a lot of alcohol and smoked and unhealthy, so-called unhealthy lifestyle, were basically very happy people. They didn't get upset with small issues here and there and did not take life too seriously. Maybe that's a factor. I don't know. And my small little question is intermittent fasting desirable for people with high blood sugar, diabetics?
Yeah, so to the first part of your question, absolutely. That's the in the longest and most powerful longevity study that's been done and is still ongoing is a Harvard longevity study. What they found was that the strongest correlate of longevity was social connections, right? So to your point, uh, these people who were smoking and drinking and maybe not, eating as healthy as what you and I might define, lived a long time, probably because they were socially well connected, and that would be a way for them to stay more happy than people who are socially isolated. This has been replicated many times, and over it shows that you could be a smoker, you could be eating, the worst possible diet, you could be an alcoholic, you could you could be living in poverty, everything else could be going wrong. But if people that are socially connected, for whatever reason, are they happier? Is it some sort of change in their uh, biochemistry in their brain and their body? They do live longer. So you have a good point there. And the second question, yeah, intermittent fasting for diabetics, yes. And as we say, yes, but yes, and we need to be careful if they are on hypoglycemic medicines, right? If somebody's on insulin or sulfonylurea or some of the newer drugs that might be associated with hypoglycemia, then they need to be careful with those medicines and the timing of the medicines because if they took glipizide or took a shot of insulin and then they're not eating for a while, then they could get in trouble with hypoglycemia. But drugs that don't cause hypoglycemia, like metformin, should be fine if someone wants to eat 2 meals a day, as long as they're monitoring, right? Whether they're doing it with a finger stick or a continuous glucometer to keep track of the blood sugars, because hypoglycemia would be the main risk. And
Thank you.
what we find is when this powerful lifestyle changes are made, it should be supervised by their physician so that we can de-prescribe, right? And that's the most joyful part of this work, is that you get to take people off their medicines rather than adding more medicine. So if we keep a close eye on the numbers and we're taking medicines off, then we can actually do them a lot of good because now they're maintaining, and you can actually put diabetes in remission. So that this is an official ICD-9 diagnosis now, that you can put in someone in the US, you can put someone's in their diagnosis, you can say diabetes in remission. So essentially, if someone has two HbA1cs under 6.5, they're on no medicine for a 3-month period, they are officially considered to have, you can't say that you've reversed it because it could come back, but you can say that the diabetes is in remission.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Atul, sir, you had raised the hand if you still want to.
I think, hi Pankaj and Dr. Bijlani, good to see. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, what a fabulous, first just even the conversation between two, it's like a generational conversation from a mentor to a student. So Pankaj, I was just intrigued and super impressed by the range of your understanding of health. So mine is a little less practical and more kind of a question in terms of understanding your thinking of how we think about health, human health, in the way we learned it physiologically, biochemically, anatomy, versus as you now look at, and you've already covered mental aspects. And as my struggle has been that when you start mixing Ayurvedic thinking with modern medicine thinking, at a practical level, it makes eminent sense. But where I have a challenge is that the fundamental framework from how Ayurveda thinks about what is health and what is frankly even a human body, the physical versus the gross versus the subtle. How has your thinking evolved as a physician, as a scientist, as a practicing doctor, of how you think about human health as you integrate these many disciplines? I know it's an abstract question, so it could be a longer conversation. So I was just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting conversation, and it's a very fundamental question about the whole paradigm, right? The assumptions, it's like the fundamental foundations on which everything is standing. I mean, it reminds me of a quote, and I don't remember if you had used this in your talk recently too, that 50% of what we know is false, right? And the scary thing is that we don't know which half of it is false. So for someone to say, "Hey, I know everything. I know all the answers. This is evidence-based medicine. We know this is how it is because uh, we can see it, and we have done this experiment and it proved." I mean, just that statement itself is not unscientific to say that, right? That's like dogma, where you're saying that you know the absolute truth, whereas the reality is that things are in motion, and really a flaming example of that right in front of us is that if modern medicine was that great and we did know all the answers, then why is 70% of humanity physically suffering, right, with all the diseases related to metabolism, obesity, and just physical disease? If you think about suffering mentally, that number may be even higher. So there has to be more to the story than what we know, and we know that whatever the things that we thought to be true a century ago or 50 years ago or even 30 years ago when I was a medical student, many of them have been refuted. And we might find that the gut microbiome, it's these bacteria they're the boss, and they're just living on us and kind of using us as a place for them to live. And essentially we are making all our choices not from our conscience, but really the gut microbiome is telling us where to go and what to do. Yeah, it's very fascinating. uh, but I think it's good to have an open mind and kind of look at other ways of thinking, right? Rather than getting stuck and saying, "Hey, I read something in Harrison's, and that's the absolute truth," would be like saying, "My religion is this book, and this has all the answers, and I'll listen to you, but I'm listening to you from, a non-believer's perspective. So I'm listening to you with the intent of just refuting whatever you have to say because I already know I'm right. And that's not a good way to learn, right? If we're here to learn and make an impact, then it's good to have an open mind and admit that we might be wrong, or whatever we're believing are half truths, and that's where we get in trouble, when we get so stuck in our positions of half truths, and we can kill each other over that. But that's not the way to go.
I think you and Dr. Bilani are embodied examples of open-minded scientists. So thank you. I know I want to be mindful of time. Thank you.
So Dr. Vijlani, a lot more than me. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. So before we close today's session, let me quickly inform that the recording of today's amazing session will be published on our YouTube channel, Yes Spirituality. You can visit the channel and explore extensive content on yoga, education, spirituality, and related subjects like psychology and wellness. Dr. Pankaj sir, thank you so much. We are truly grateful for your time and the valuable knowledge you shared with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and I learn something every time I'm in your presence, Dr. Bijlani, and this August group too. Thank you. It's great to see so many friends.
Thank you so much. Hope to have you again soon.
Thank you.
For another session.
I would love to. Thank you.
Participants, thank you so much for being with us today. We'll close today's session now with a moment of peaceful silence. Namaste.